Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Sumo Cyco, Initiation, out May 7th on Napalm Records. This album has 12 tracks, 42 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are a Canadian rock metal band. Now the title of the record is really interesting because I feel for a lot of people this will be their initiation into Sumo Cyco. This is their first album being released on a major label, so this is going to open a lot of doors for them and it's going to allow them to have a much larger fan base going forward. Now, getting into this record, this is an album that has pretty much a modern style structure. And what I mean by that is this is an album that's constructed for today's modern listener. It doesn't really matter if you listen to this album from the first to the last track, if you start in the middle, if you start at the end and you move yourself backwards, or if you listen to it on shuffle. This is a record that's made out of 12 individual tracks that I don't feel like need to be listened to in a certain order in order for you to really grasp the idea, grasp the overall soundscape, or feel that you have some sort of connection with this album. Everything works regardless of how you enjoy the album because everything works on the individual basis. There are some elements that interconnect the songs, but they're not strong enough in order to really drive the audience from one song to the next and force you to really listen to this record from the first track all the way to the last track in the order that it's put together. It's volatile, it has a volatile construction. And that volatility is not just present in the construction of the album, it's also present in the soundscape of the record. They're a band that pulls from a lot of different genres, and on this album you have a mix of electronic, pop, rock, metal, reggae, ska. Everything that you can think of is thrown at you on this album within the soundscape that it holds. For fans of the band or for listeners that are familiar with Sumo Cyco, this is nothing new for them, but for those of you that are listening to them for the first time, this is perhaps going to create a jolt of energy because you're not sure what the next song is going to bring. You're not sure exactly where the record is going because it's moving in so many different directions at the same time. One of the things that I felt listening to this record is also that it took me back to a much later time. This band really reminds me of bands like No Doubt, for example, that merged a lot of different styles, a lot of different aromas, a lot of different genres into their sound. And we haven't seen a lot of bands come forward that have that sort of DNA. These guys almost have an old soul as far as the overall sound approach of this record specifically is concerned. Now, the quality of the sound is amazing. This is a record that really has a well-defined sound, a well-defined way of recording it and way of delivering it. But it's not an album that's driven by one or two elements within it. You can't really talk about drums, you can't really talk about bass or guitars as far as the driving force of the soundscape of this record. This is an album that lives off of all of those elements coming together in order to create the ebbs and flows that the individual tracks have and obviously that the album has to offer. But there's not one predominant element. There's not one single element on this record that you can put all your eggs in that basket and allow it to be the one that carries you all the way to the promised land. That's not the kind of record that this is. This is an album that really lives off of the junction of all different parts in order to create a full picture. That is the soundscape of the record. That is exactly what you're going to get. Now, you can talk about drums, you can talk about guitars. I like the sound of the drums on this record, not overly heavy or not heavy at all, just really creating a strong bass line, a strong foundation that allows all the other elements to be a little bit more eclectic, that allows the electronic elements to come to the forefront, that allows the guitars to perhaps lose themselves a little bit in the soundscape of the tracks. So the drums play an important role, but not a defining role. And the same could be said about the guitars. They play an important role in terms of moving the tracks in different directions, not necessarily pushing them forward, but just really pointing you in the area in which they want to take you. Sometimes a little bit more groovy, sometimes a little bit more heavy, sometimes a little just more driven, more straightforward, more to the point. They never stay very consistent in one look and one feel from track to track. They try to stay more consistent within the tracks themselves, but not from song to song. And that takes me to the last point of this album, really the beacon of the record, and that is Skye's vocals. If there is one single element that you can put above everything else, and this is an album that really feels like it was created to surround her voice, to surround what she can do, you have to put the vocals on that pedestal. You have to give them the importance that they have on an album like this. everything else almost becomes secondary. Everything else is there to emphasize how strong her vocal approach is. And at times she kind of merges different styles and different aromas. Some songs you almost feel like you're listening to Tatiana from Ginger, and some tracks she has that Gwen Stefani style and approach to her voice, and sometimes she's somewhere in between those two. So she has a very interesting range, she has a very interesting approach, and she gives so much life, so much energy to the songs. With her voice, she brings the tracks to life, she brings the lyrics to life, she makes the songs interesting, she makes the songs bouncy, she makes the songs groovy, she makes the songs driven. She's really the dictator of what the tracks are all about in terms of how you perceive them and how they feel and how they come across. Overall, this is a very interesting record from this band. A record, like I said, it's going to open the doors for a lot of new fans that perhaps never heard of them before, being on a much larger platform. I don't think this is an album that fits the mold if you're more of a hardcore metalhead and you're looking for something slightly heavier, you're looking for something a little bit more driven, a little bit more chunky, with a little bit more power. This is not Ginger, this is not No Doubt, it's somewhere in the middle, and then it includes a lot of other different influences, so it allows the overall experience of the record to be one that's not really easy to define at all. So for those hardcore metalhead fans, this is one that perhaps you will skip, or at least most people will skip if you fall under that category. If you have more of a wide range as far as your palate taste is when it comes to music, if you're not as well defined by a genre or by a style and you like to listen to something groovy, something perhaps a little bit more poppy, something that has some catchy hooks, that it's super catchy all around, then this band definitely fits that mold. It's a party album. You really feel like this is a bouncy record that has a lot of movement to it, that makes you want to bounce, makes you want to headbang, it makes you want to tap your feet, it makes you want to move in general. But once again, it's an album that's really going to divide the fans in terms of where you're coming from and what kind of music you listen to. It's not going to appeal to a wide range of fans, but it's definitely going to appeal to a very specific group. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I want to start off with M.I.A, a pop electronic ska track. At least that's how it comes across to me. Straightforward in the verses, and then the vocals really guide you throughout those verses. That more straightforward approach is there, not just musically, but it's also there vocally. The chorus is a little bit more bouncy, has a little bit more heat in it, and it feels a little bit warmer. The song becomes super catchy in that chorus, and it's a combination of how it sounds and obviously the vocal range and the drive that those vocals give to the song. After the second chorus, the song builds a little bit more, becomes a little bit bigger, but it never loses that hookiness, that catchiness that it has. It just feels like it gains a little bit more volume as it moves all the way towards the end. Next, Cyclone. If there is a groovy dance track on this album, perhaps this is it. It's a really bouncy track all the way around, from the beginning all the way to the end, but they follow a very common pattern throughout this whole album, which is allowing the verses to be a little bit more direct, a little bit more straightforward, and then putting a lot more emphasis in the chorus, making them a lot more hooky, a lot more catchy, a lot more groovy. And this song is no different. It kind of feels a little bit like it's treading water in the verses and then becoming a little bit bigger across all elements once you move into the chorus. The sound overall is very chunky in this track. It just feels like a very thick track, and the guitars play a role in that, but that doesn't take anything away from what this track is all about, which is a pop rock groovy track from beginning all the way to the end with those peaks in the chorus. Last but not least, Run with Giants, my favorite song on the album. This is an absolute hit. It has a little bit of reggae, it has that ska feel to it, still very bouncy, very groovy, offering a lot of different elements, once again very contained, perhaps more direct in the verses, and then absolutely explosive once you get into the chorus. And the chorus of this song is just electrifying. I mean, it's impossible for you to listen to this track more than once, or just once. One chorus, that's all you really need. You listen to the first chorus, you know exactly what the song is going to be about, and you're going to remember that chorus forever, and you're going to be singing it every time this song plays. It just has all of these trademark elements that you saw throughout this record up until this point, and you're going to see from this point forward. I think this is perhaps one of the tracks that really encompasses everything that this album has to offer, both musically and vocally. I felt like everything that they showed me on this album perhaps was sprinkled into one track, and that track is Run with Giants. This is it. This is Sumo Cyco with Initiation, out May 7th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those, getting back to you. Take care, guys.